In a quiet, unassuming town, the legend of the man in the black hat loomed over the residents like a dark cloud. It began with whispered tales passed down through generations. A figure clad in a long, tattered coat and a wide-brimmed black hat, always lurking at the edge of the woods. Some claimed he was a guardian, others a harbinger of doom. But as the years went by, the stories turned sinister. One fateful evening, Sarah, a curious teenager, decided to investigate the tales for herself. Armed with a flashlight and an insatiable thirst for adventure, she ventured into the forest just as dusk began to creep in. The air was thick with tension, and the trees seemed to close in around her. As she wandered deeper, the sunlight faded, replaced by an eerie twilight that sent shivers down her spine. Suddenly she heard a rustle behind her, a soft but unmistakable sound that sent her heart racing. She turned, shining her flashlight into the darkness, but saw nothing, just the towering trees standing sentinel. Determined, she pressed on, dismissing her fears as mere imagination. Minutes felt like hours as she traversed the uneven ground, the woods growing darker and more foreboding. Then, out of the corner of her eye, she caught a glimpse of movement, a shadow darting between the trees. It was quick, but it was unmistakably there. She felt a chill wash over her, the instinct to run clawing at her insides. Curiosity held her in place. As she strained to see through the thickening gloom, the figure materialized. The man in the black hat stood before her, a silent sentinel. His face was obscured, but his presence felt suffocating, as if the very air around him had turned heavy. "Why are you here?" he whispered, his voice like gravel crunching underfoot. Fear coursed through Sarah. She struggled to find her voice but could only manage a stutter. I wanted to see if you were real." The man tilted his head, and for a moment, the world around her seemed to hold its breath. "Real?" he echoed, his tone mocking. "What is real in a world built on lies?" In that moment, time seemed to stretch, and she felt an overwhelming urge to flee, but her legs were rooted to the ground, fear paralyzing her. He took a step closer, the shadows wrapping around him like tendrils. "You shouldn't have come here," he murmured, and Sarah's heart raced with the realization that he was not a guardian but a predator. Panic surged and she finally found her voice. "I'm sorry, I'll leave," she gasped, turning to run, but the woods shifted around her. The paths she thought she knew twisted and turned, leading her deeper into the darkness. Desperation clawed at her as she sprinted, but the whispers of the trees seemed to mock her efforts. No matter how fast she ran, the oppressive presence of the man in the black hat loomed closer, his cold laughter echoing through the night. "You can't escape what you've awakened," he called, his voice weaving through the branches. Finally, she burst into a clearing, gasping for breath, but the relief was short-lived. The figure was there, standing just at the edge, watching her with an unsettling stillness. "You've seen me," he said, his eyes glinting beneath the hat's shadow. "Now, you are part of the story." As the last remnants of light disappeared, the forest closed in around her, the shadows swallowing her whole. The townsfolk would later speak of her disappearance, but they would never understand the truth of what lurked in the woods. The man in the black hat remained, waiting for the next curious soul to cross his path, eternally bound to the darkness, a figure of dread in a town forever haunted by his presence. As the darkness deepened, Sarah felt an icy dread settle in her bones. The clearing, once a fleeting sanctuary, morphed into an altar of terror, the trees twisting into grotesque shapes that seemed to mock her every breath. The man in the black hat stepped forward, and with each stride, the air thickened with an overwhelming sense of despair. "You've broken the boundary," he said, his voice reverberating through the night. "Now, you must understand the weight of your curiosity." Sarah's mind raced. She glanced around, searching for any sign of escape, but the forest seemed to close in, the trees leaning closer, as if to listen to the unfolding drama. "What do you want from me?" she cried, desperation leaking into her voice. The man in the black hat tilted his head, his hat casting a deeper shadow over his features. "It is not what I want, but what you have awakened," he replied. "This place holds stories, secrets that hunger for flesh, for souls. You have disturbed their slumber." A cold wind swept through the clearing, and Sarah shivered, feeling as if the very air was alive, crawling with unseen eyes. "I didn't mean to," she stammered, but her words fell flat. The shadows around her began to writhe, whispering secrets in a language she could not understand. "You must learn," the man continued, taking another step closer, his presence overwhelming. The forest is alive. It remembers. Suddenly, the ground beneath her feet began to tremble, the earth shifting as if it were awakening from a long sleep. Gnarled roots erupted from the soil, snaking toward her like skeletal hands. Panic surged anew, and she stumbled back, nearly falling as the tendrils reached for her. No, she screamed, desperately trying to fight against the pull of the ground. But the shadows laughed, a low, mocking sound that reverberated in her chest. "Fight all you want," Sarah the man in the black hat said, his voice calm amidst the chaos. "You are already entangled in their web. They know your fears, your regrets. They will use them." The shadows slithered closer, whispering her name, echoing her deepest insecurities and failures, memories of times she felt invisible, times she had wished to escape her life, flooded her mind, blurring the line between reality and nightmare. Desperation clawed at her heart, and she searched for something, anything to anchor herself. "I can't be part of this," she shouted, the defiance coursing through her. "I'm not afraid," but the laughter only grew louder, a cacophony that seemed to drown her out. The man in the black hat leaned closer, and she caught a glimpse of his eyes, dark voids filled with endless torment. "Fear is the currency of this place," he whispered, his breath chilling her to the bone. "It feeds the shadows. And you, my dear, have so much to offer." In that moment, a realization struck her. She wasn't just an observer, she was a player in this twisted game. She needed to fight back, to reclaim her power. Summoning every ounce of courage, Sarah focused on her breath, forcing herself to think of the light, of the warmth of home, of the love that existed beyond the forest's edge. "I won't let you take me," she screamed, a fierce determination igniting within her. With newfound strength, she charged forward, breaking through the grasp of the creeping shadows. The man in the black hat's laughter turned into a furious growl as she sprinted past him, the trees screaming in protest as she broke free from their sinister grasp. But as she ran, she could feel the forest shifting, its very essence trying to pull her back, to reclaim her as part of its dark tapestry. Every step felt like a battle, each heartbeat echoing the urgency of her escape. The darkness chased her, clawing at her heels, the whispers intensifying. "You can't outrot you've awakened," echoed in her ears, but she pushed forward, desperate to reach the edge of the woods. The boundary between safety and horror loomed ahead, a thin line that felt impossibly far. Just as she neared the tree line, the shadows surged one last time, wrapping around her ankles and pulling her down. Sarah stumbled, hitting the ground hard. "No," she screamed, fighting against the invisible grip that sought to drag her back into the abyss. In a final act of defiance, she clutched her flashlight, illuminating the darkness with a blinding beam. The light cut through the shadows, causing them to writhe and retreat momentarily. Seizing the opportunity, she sprang to her feet, bursting through the tree line and into the open air. She stumbled onto the familiar dirt road, gasping for breath, as the moonlight bathed her in its silvery glow. The laughter and whispers faded, the oppressive weight lifting as she turned to look back at the darkened woods. But the man in the black hat remained, a figure shrouded in shadows, watching her with a knowing gaze. "You may have escaped," he called, his voice echoing hauntingly, "but remember this, the darkness never truly forgets." With that, he faded into the shadows, leaving Sarah trembling on the edge of the forest, her heart racing, knowing that she would never be the same. The tales would live on, but now they held a chilling truth. She had encountered the man in the black hat, and the darkness within her would always whisper of the night she ventured too close to the unknown. As the moon hung high in the sky, its silvery glow illuminating the dirt road, Sarah felt the weight of her escape pressing down on her. She glanced back at the forest, its silhouette a dark, jagged edge against the night sky. Though she had physically broken free, the emotional scars of her encounter remained, gnawing at her insides like a hungry beast. Every rustle of leaves seemed to echo the man in the black hat's ominous words, a reminder that her brush with darkness was far from over. The chill of the night air sent shivers through her body, and as she stumbled along the path, she couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Shadows danced at the corners of her vision, twisting and shifting in the moonlight. Her flashlight flickered, the beam struggling against the encroaching darkness as if sensing her lingering fear. Desperation surged within her. What if the man in the black hat decided to follow her, to reclaim what she had taken from him? Suddenly, the tranquility of the night shattered as a piercing scream echoed through the stillness, a sound that curdled her blood. It came from the direction of the woods, sharp and desperate. Fear clawed at her throat, and she froze, heart pounding in her ears. "No, please," she whispered, the realization dawning that the forest was not done with her yet. The scream cut off abruptly, replaced by an eerie silence that seemed to swallow the world whole. Instinct kicked in, and she turned to run, the dirt path blurring beneath her hurried steps. Panic fueled her, but with each stride she felt an invisible weight pushing down on her, trying to drag her back into the forest's depths. She recalled the stories the lost souls who had ventured too close to the woods, never to return. What if she was destined to join them, a ghostly whisper among the trees, forever haunted by her own curiosity? Her thoughts spiraled as she reached the town's edge, the familiar streetlights flickering to life like distant stars. Relief washed over her, but it was fleeting. The shadows from the forest stretched into the streets, creeping closer with an insatiable hunger. "Get inside," she urged herself, sprinting toward her house, her childhood sanctuary that suddenly felt so fragile. As she reached her front porch, the door creaked open, revealing her mother standing there, eyes wide with concern. "Sarah, thank God you're home." Her mother's relief was palpable, but it was overshadowed by Sarah's urgency. "We need to lock the doors." "Now." "What's wrong?" her mother asked, confusion mingling with fear. I saw him. The man in the black hat. He's still out there." But before she could explain further, the air turned electric, a palpable tension wrapping around them like a noose. The wind howled, rattling the windows, and Sarah could swear she heard whispers calling her name, a chorus of lost souls beckoning from the darkness. "Lock the door," she repeated, her voice rising in panic. Her mother hurried to comply, the sound of the deadbolt sliding home offering a momentary sense of safety. But as they settled into the dimly lit living room, the shadows continued to creep in, pooling in corners and curling around furniture. Sarah felt their presence, an unsettling awareness that they were waiting, watching. "Mum, I can't stay here," she said, her voice trembling. "We have to leave town. Now." Her mother's brow furrowed in confusion. "Leave? Sarah, you're just tired. You had a scare. That's all. We'll talk about it in the morning." But Sarah knew it wasn't just a scare, it was a warning. Then, from the window, a figure emerged from the depths of the darkness, the man in the black hat, his silhouette stark against the moonlight. He stood just beyond the edge of the yard, a menacing sentinel with a knowing gaze. "You think you can escape," he called, his voice smooth yet gravelly. "You're still tied to the forest. It remembers you." Panic surged anew, and Sarah grabbed her mother's arm. "Don't look at him," she shouted, yanking her away from the window. But the moment was already lost. The whispers grew louder, filling the room with a cacophony of despair. "You've brought him here," they chanted, echoing her own fears back at her. "No," Sarah cried, desperate to drown out the voices. "We have to go." But as she turned to the door, it slammed shut with a deafening bang, the walls trembling as if the house itself was trying to keep them inside. The shadows coiled tighter, dark tendrils reaching out as if to ensnare them. "Sarah," her mother screamed. Fear etched across her face. "What's happening?" The man in the black hat stepped closer, his eyes gleaming with a sinister light. "You've brought her to me," he whispered, his voice dripping with malice. "A perfect addition to my collection." In that moment, a surge of fury ignited within Sarah. "No," she yelled, her voice rising above the chaos. "I won't let you take her." Channeling every ounce of defiance, she summoned the light from her flashlight, raising it high. The beam cut through the darkness, illuminating the room and pushing back the shadows. The man in the black hat recoiled, his laughter turning to a snarl. "Light can only hold the darkness at bay for so long," he hissed, retreating momentarily. "But remember, my dear, shadows never truly fade." With that, he vanished into the darkness, but the atmosphere remained thick with tension, the air crackling with the remnants of his presence. Sarah turned to her mother, who was now trembling, eyes wide with fear. "We need to stay together," Sarah insisted, fear and determination mingling in her voice. "We can't let him take us." As they huddled in the living room, The shadows crept closer, whispering secrets that clawed at their sanity. Each creak of the house, each flicker of light, heightened their fear. They barricaded the doors and windows, every scrape and scratch from the outside sending shivers down their spines. The night stretched on, and just when Sarah thought the worst was over, the whispers shifted, turning into desperate cries. "Help us, they wailed, the voices echoing the agony of lost souls. The room grew colder, a palpable chill seeping into their bones, and Sarah realized that the darkness was trying to lure them back. "Don't listen," she shouted, shaking her mother's shoulders. "We have to fight with every ounce of strength." They focused on the light, hoping it would be enough to shield them from the horrors lurking just beyond the walls. But as the hours dragged on, fatigue began to weigh them down. The whispers morphed into a single haunting voice, echoing her deepest fears and regrets. "You are not safe. You can never escape," it taunted, creeping into her mind, seeping into her very essence. Then, without warning, the lights flickered and went out, plunging them into darkness. Panic surged anew as Sarah fumbled for the flashlight, its beam a fragile lifeline in the overwhelming blackness. "Stay close," she urged, her heart pounding as the whispers intensified, surrounding them like a storm. In that suffocating moment, Sarah felt a surge of determination. "We have to confront this," she declared, gripping her mother's hand tightly. "We can't let the darkness win." Taking a deep breath, she stepped toward the center of the room, facing the shadows head-on. "I am not afraid of you," she shouted, her voice ringing out with defiance. The shadows paused, the whispers momentarily silenced. But then, as if sensing her challenge, they surged forward, a tidal wave of darkness. Sarah's flashlight flickered, the beam sputtering as the darkness closed in. "We will consume you," the voice hissed, a cacophony of anger and despair. But Sarah refused to yield. With a fierce cry, she swung the flashlight wide, the beam cutting through the darkness like a knife. "You don't own me," she shouted, her words reverberating through the room. The shadows recoiled, momentarily stunned by her resolve. Taking advantage of their hesitation, she reached out to her mother. Together, "We can do this." With renewed determination, they focused their energies on the light, pushing against the encroaching darkness with every ounce of strength they had left. In that moment, a brilliant light erupted from the flashlight, bathing the room in an ethereal glow. The shadows writhed and screamed, their forms disintegrating in the radiant light. "No, this cannot be," they wailed, the voices merging into a chaotic chorus of despair. As the light expanded, it pushed the darkness back, illuminating the corners of the room that had been consumed for so long. With a final, piercing scream, the shadows disbanded, dissipating into nothingness. The oppressive weight lifted, the air feeling lighter, the whispers fading into silence. Panting, Sarah and her mother stood together, hearts racing but filled with a newfound sense of empowerment. They had faced the darkness and emerged victorious, but deep down, Sarah knew that the battle was far from over. The man in the black hat had not truly been defeated. He would always linger at the edges of their minds, a dark reminder of the unknown that awaited in the shadows. As dawn broke, casting the first light of day into their home, Sarah took a deep breath, determination coursing through her. She would not be defined by her fears. The darkness may always exist, but she now held the power to face it head-on. And with her mother by her side, she vowed to be the light in the encroaching shadows, ready for whatever may come next. As dawn spilled into the room, Sarah and her mother took a moment to breathe, the silence around them feeling almost sacred after the chaos of the night. The light brought warmth, chasing away the lingering chill that had settled in their bones. They exchanged glances, a silent understanding passing between them, a bond forged in the fires of fear and courage. "Do you think it's really over?" Sarah asked, her voice barely above a whisper, tinged with both hope and uncertainty. Her mother took a deep breath, brushing a strand of hair from Sarah's face. "I want to believe it is. But we need to be prepared." She glanced out the window, the forest standing in the distance, its dark silhouette now softened by the morning light. "The stories we uncovered. There's something about that place, something we need to understand." Sarah nodded, feeling a strange mix of dread and determination. "I'll go with you. We need to face it, to learn what it wants. With a shared resolve, they quickly gathered their belongings: flashlights, a notebook to document their findings, and a small, portable speaker for comfort. The plan was simple: return to the forest and confront the source of their fears, to uncover the truth about the man in the black hat once and for all. They stepped outside, the air crisp and fresh, the familiar sounds of the town waking up around them. As they walked towards the forest's edge, Sarah's heart raced. The path felt different in the light of day, yet the shadows still loomed like sentinels waiting for the sun to set. Upon reaching the clearing where they had faced the darkness the night before, they paused. The ground felt firm beneath their feet, yet an unsettling energy pulsed through the air. "This is where it happened," Sarah said, glancing at her mother. "Let's start by looking for any signs, anything that feels off," her mother suggested, her voice steady despite the tension. They began their investigation, scouring the area for clues. Sarah noticed strange markings on the trees, symbols she couldn't recognize, but that seemed to pulse with a life of their own. "Mum, look at this," she called, pointing to the bark. As they examined the symbols, a chill swept through the air, and the whispers returned, swirling around them, muffled yet insistent. "Help us. Help us." "Stay focused," her mother said, grounding Sarah with her presence. "We're not here to be afraid." They pressed on, navigating deeper into the woods, the path becoming more overgrown and twisted. The further they went, the stronger the whispers became, now laced with anguish. Sarah could feel her heartbeat quicken, a primal instinct warning her of danger. Then they stumbled upon a small, dilapidated cabin hidden among the trees, its windows darkened and door slightly ajar. "This must be it," Sarah whispered, the weight of the moment settling heavily on her shoulders. They approached cautiously, the air thick with foreboding. As they stepped inside, the scent of damp wood and decay hit them. The cabin was eerily quiet, save for the faint rustle of leaves outside. "Let's split up," her mother suggested, her voice barely above a whisper. "We can cover more ground." "Are you sure?" "I don't want to be alone," Sarah hesitated, feeling the shadows closing in. "I'll be right here. Just call out if you need me," with a nod of agreement. They separated, each stepping into different rooms. Sarah's heart raced as she explored the remnants of what appeared to be an old living space. Cobwebs hung from the ceiling, and dust coated the furniture, but one thing caught her eye: a small, cracked mirror leaning against the wall. She approached it cautiously, feeling an inexplicable pull. As she gazed into the mirror, the surface shimmered, and for a moment she saw not just her reflection, but shadows swirling behind her. "No," she breathed, stepping back in fear. The whispers intensified, echoing through her mind, urging her to listen. "You cannot escape." "Sarah," her mother's voice broke through the fog of dread. "I found something." Rushing back to her mother, Sarah felt the air around her shift, the shadows lingering at the edge of her vision. "What is it?" she asked, panic rising. Her mother held up an old, weathered journal, its pages yellowed and fragile. It belonged to someone who lived here long ago. It talks about the man in the black hat, how he collects souls, drawing them in with their fears. "What do we do with this?" Sarah asked, her mind racing. "Knowledge is power," her mother replied, flipping through the pages. "If we can understand how he works, maybe we can find a way to stop him for good." As they read the entries together, they learned that the man in the black hat thrived on fear and despair, feeding off those who wandered too close to the woods. The only way to break his hold was to confront their own fears directly. "We have to show him we're not afraid," Sarah said, her voice steadying. With newfound resolve, they decided to return to the clearing, the heart of the darkness. They stepped outside, the forest feeling both familiar and alien as they made their way back. Once at the clearing, they positioned themselves in the center, the journal clutched tightly in Sarah's hands. Together, she said, looking into her mother's eyes, "We confront him, we reclaim our power." The wind picked up, swirling around them, as if responding to their defiance. Shadows began to coalesce at the edge of the clearing, forming the shape of the man in the black hat. "You think you can defeat me?" His voice rumbled, smooth yet menacing. "You are but a whisper in the dark." "No," Sarah shouted, her heart pounding. "We know who you are, we know your power, and we're not afraid anymore." The shadows surged forward, but this time they held their ground, channeling the strength of their shared experiences. The light from their flashlights flickered, but it was their united strength that illuminated the space. "Your hold over us ends now," Sarah declared, focusing her will into the beam of light. "We refuse to be afraid." The man in the black hat hesitated, a flicker of uncertainty crossing his shadowy face. The whispers grew louder, turning into cries of anger and despair. "You cannot escape your fate. You belong to the darkness." But Sarah's defiance fueled their resolve. "We are the light, we are stronger than you." With one final surge of energy, they directed their light toward the heart of the shadows, their voices rising in a unified chant of strength and hope. The shadows writhed and screamed as the light engulfed them, illuminating the clearing in a brilliant blaze. "No, this cannot be," the man howled, his form disintegrating under the brilliance. The darkness shrank back, the whispers fading into silence as the light expanded, banishing the shadows to the depths of the forest. Panting, Sarah and her mother stood together, the dawn illuminating their surroundings. They had faced their fears and emerged victorious, but as they caught their breath, a flicker of apprehension lingered in Sarah's heart. The victory was theirs, yet she felt a strange understanding wash over her. The darkness would always exist, waiting at the edges of their minds. But now, armed with knowledge and courage, they were ready to confront it together, no matter what lay ahead. As they walked back home, sunlight streaming through the trees, Sarah felt a shift within herself. She would not allow fear to define her. They had reclaimed their lives, and together they would shine brightly against any darkness that dared to encroach upon their world. When they finally reached their home, the warmth of the sun seemed to envelop them, chasing away the last remnants of dread. They entered the house, the familiar sense of breakfast wafting through the air, grounding them in the present. "Let's start fresh," her mother suggested, a smile breaking through the remnants of fear. "We'll turn this experience into something positive." Together, they set to work, filling their home with laughter and light. They shared their story with friends, empowering others to face their own fears and seek the light within. In the days that followed, Sarah felt the echoes of the night fade, replaced by a sense of hope. The forest stood in the distance, a reminder of their struggle, but it no longer felt like a prison. Instead, it became a symbol of their resilience, a testament to the power of unity and love in the face of darkness. As the sun set each evening, Sarah would sit on her porch, watching the shadows stretch and dance, but now they held no power over her. The man in the black hat was but a memory, a lesson learned about the strength that lay within her. With her mother beside her, she knew they were ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead, united by their light and unyielding resolve. Together, they would always be the light in the shadows, ready to shine brightly against any darkness that dared to approach.